We live in interesting times. Today's stories. African leaders gather as Egypt takes helm at African Union.
Despite the continent's own social, economic and security challenges, Africa's governments...
Pedro Sanchez accuses protesters of dividing Spanish people.
Mirad, como presidente del gobierno faltaría más. Yo respeto la concentración.
Venezuelans cross the border to buy food in Colombia.
Todo me hace falta porque no es fácil estar aquí en este país.
French economy and finance minister calls for a stronger Europe.
We hope that we will be able to find a consensus at the OECD level on a fair and efficient digital taxation.
South Korea announces hike in payment for U.S. troops.
I think the response so far has been quite positive.
U.S. envoy for Afghanistan discusses peace talks with the Taliban.
My overall goal is, at the direction of the President and the Secretary of State, not to seek a withdrawal agreement.
Democrats unveil their Green New Deal resolution.
We are talking about jobs and justice.
A state of emergency has been declared in Washington as the measles cases spike.
Community have the local urgent care down the road.
Plus, Edmonton endures below zero temperatures.
The prairie provinces are unlikely to see any relief from these cold temperatures.
Hello everyone, I'm Ace Ramirez, bringing you stories from around the globe. And this is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Leaders of African countries gather in Addis Ababa as Rwandan President Paul Kagame passes the baton of the African Union chair to Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame, who led an active reformist tenure as African Union chair, on Sunday passes the baton to Egypt, seen as more likely to focus on security issues than expanding the powers of the body. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi will officially take over the post of ceremonial head of the AU, which rotates between the 5 regions of the continent at the start of the 2-day summit in Addis Ababa. The meeting got underway after a ceremony inaugurating a commemorative statue of the late Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie at the AU headquarters in honor of his role in the formation of the continental body. While multiple crises on the continent will be on the agenda of heads of state from the 55 member nations, the summit will also focus on institutional reforms and the establishment of a continent-wide free trade zone. The Continental Free Trade Area, or the CFTA, was agreed by 44 nations in March 2018, but only 19 countries have ratified the agreement, with 22 needed for it to come into effect. The single market is a flagship of the AU's Agenda 2063 program, conceived as a strategic framework for socio-economic transformation. Cairo is backing the initiative, but analysts say it will be less likely to focus on the financial and administrative reforms pushed by Kagame. Sisi is, however, expected to focus more on security, peacekeeping, and post-war reconstruction, issues closely tied to the AU's 2019 theme of refugees, returnees, and internally displaced persons.
Despite the continent's own social, economic and security challenges, Africa's governments and people have kept borders, doors and hearts open to millions in need.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Saturday that peaceful elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, and Madagascar, as well as peace deals in South Sudan and Central African Republic, and the truce between Ethiopia and Eritrea, were signs of a wind of hope on the continent. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez accuses the right and far-right demonstrators in Madrid of working against the unity of Spain while his government is trying to, and I quote, resolve a state of crisis that the Popular Party aggravated while in power.
Como presidente del Gobierno, faltaría más. Yo respeto la concentración que se está celebrando hoy en la Plaza de Colón. Que están haciendo una concentración en contra de una persona, de mi persona, que cuando fue líder de la oposición y hubo 2 referéndums ilegales en Cataluña, una declaración unilateral de independencia y un artículo 155 que se tuvo que aplicar en consecuencia como para defender la unidad de España y sobre todo para restablecer la Constitución en Cataluña, permanecí siempre como líder de la oposición al lado del Gobierno del Partido Popular. Y que lo que estoy haciendo ahora como presidente del Gobierno, siempre respetando la Constitución, es resolver una crisis de Estado que contribuyó el Partido Popular a agravar cuando estuvieron en el Gobierno durante los últimos 7 años. El Gobierno de España trabaja por la unidad de España y trabajar por la unidad de España significa unir a los españoles y no enfrentarlos como están haciendo las derechas en la Plaza de Colón hoy.
Tens of thousands of people waving Spanish flags joined a rally on Sunday in Madrid, called by right-wing and far-right parties against Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez over his negotiations with Catalan separatists. Under the shadow of a huge Spanish flag that flies above the central Colón Square, the demonstrators waved their own smaller red and yellow versions of the same banner and held signs reading, "Stop Sanchez, Elections Now." Municipal police estimated some 45,000 people had taken part in the protest, which comes just 2 days before the high-profile trial of Catalan separatist leaders opens in Madrid under the national and foreign spotlight. The rally was called by center-right Ciudadanos, the conservative Popular Party PP, and far-right Vox, which has only recently burst into Spain's political scene, as well as a handful of smaller far-right groups. They are angered by Sanchez's decision to take a more conciliatory tone with pro-independence parties, whose votes are crucial to the legislative agenda of his 8-month-old minority government. Before the start of the rally, PP head Pablo Casado told reporters, and I quote, "The government of Sanchez's time is up." Sanchez came to power in June with the support of Catalan nationalist parties, which voted with him in a no-confidence motion against former Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy, whose PP was embroiled in a corruption scandal. Polls showed that between them, the PP, Ciudadanos, and Vox would win a majority of a general election were held today, giving them the combined parliamentary clout to drive Sanchez from office. The 3 parties won a majority in a regional election in the southwestern region of Andalusia in December, ousting the socialists from power in the region after 36 years. They called the rally after Sanchez's government last week accepted the presence, as asked by the Catalan separatists, of an independent rapporteur in future talks between Catalan parties. The right-wing parties accused the government of treachery over the move. Despite the government's concession, Catalan separatist parties still refuse to back the government's 2019 budget. If Sanchez is unable to approve his budget, he could call elections before his term is over in 2020.
Thousands of Venezuelans cross the Simon Bolivar International Border Bridge every day to buy food and other essentials in Colombia, longing for a better economic and political solution that would allow them to improve their quality of life back home.
Todo me hace falta porque no es fácil estar aquí en este país, porque uno deja todo atrás para buscar un futuro mejor, porque allá no se consigue nada, no se consigue trabajo, no se consigue nada.
En Venezuela, ¿verdad? Es más difícil adquirir los alimentos porque Si se consiguen, tienen variedad de precios. Aquí en Colombia hay se habla de un mismo monto, porque hay una economía más estable.
Él dice no, que no somos mendigos, no es que seamos mendigos, sino gracias a los otros países que nos quieren ayudar, ¿verdad? Pero entonces ellos tienen mal al país, ni hacen ni dejan que nos ayuden.
The French Minister of the Economy and Finance, Bruno Le Maire, makes a plea in Dubai to make Europe stronger and calls for fair and efficient digital taxation.
We need to accelerate work at a global level. We hope that we will be able to find a consensus at the OECD level on a fair and efficient digital taxation, because it is in the interest of all the world economies to introduce that fair and efficient digital taxation. The last point I wanted to tackle today, after the situation in France and the necessity of fighting against inequalities, which will be once again at the heart of the French willingness for its G7 presidency, is to make Europe stronger. The world needs rules. The world needs a level playing field. If we want to be efficient, we need to abide by the same rules.
Coming up, South Korea announces hike in payment for U.S. troops. U.S. envoy for Afghanistan discusses peace talks with the Taliban. Democrats unveil their Green New Deal resolution. A state of emergency has been declared in Washington as the measles cases spike. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. will be right back. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Seoul said Sunday it agreed to hike its payment for maintaining American troops on its soil, settling a dispute with its longtime ally ahead of a second summit between the U.S. and North Korea. The two countries have been in a security alliance since the 1950 to 1953 Korean War, which ended with an armistice rather than a peace treaty, with more than 28,000 U.S. troops stationed in the south to guard against threats from Pyongyang.
The United States government realizes that Korea does a lot for our alliance and for peace and stability in this region, and the SMA is only a small part of that, but it's an important part, and we're very pleased that our consultations resulted in an agreement, I think, that will strengthen transparency and strengthen and deepen our cooperation in the alliance.
I think the response so far has been quite positive. Of course, there are some points of criticism as well, and we will have to deal with them. But I think at this point we were able to close the gap on the total amount, the number, and that I think very much due to the goodwill and the trust that the two sides have built over the past year.
The U.S. President and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un are expected to discuss an official declaration to end the decades-old war, a prelude to a peace treaty, at their second summit in Hanoi later this month. At their first meeting in Singapore last year, the notoriously unpredictable U.S. president had made a shock decision to suspend U.S.-South Korea military drills. But Trump told U.S. broadcaster CBS last week that he had no plans to remove U.S. troops from South Korea as part of a deal at the upcoming summit, although he admitted maybe someday he would withdraw them, adding, and I quote, "It's very expensive to keep troops there." Since the deal is only valid for 1 year, the two sides may soon have to return to the negotiating table. Seoul contributed around 960 billion won last year, more than 40% of the total bill, financing the construction of American military facilities and paying South Korean civilians working on U.S. bases. According to Yonhap News Agency, the deal will officially go into effect after it receives parliamentary approval in South Korea, which is expected to take place in April.
Zalmay Khalilzad, the U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan Reconciliation, discusses ongoing talks with the Taliban to end the war in Afghanistan and the conditions for a withdrawal of U.S. troops from the country. Speaking at the Institute of Peace in Washington, he says his goal is, I quote, "not to seek a withdrawal agreement, but a peace agreement."
My overall goal is, at the direction of the President and the Secretary of State, not to seek a withdrawal agreement, but a peace agreement. We have reached an agreement in principle with the Taliban on a framework that would provide guarantees, an enforcement mechanism. Nothing is agreed to until everything has been agreed to. And the other issues that must be dealt with are issues of a roadmap for Afghanistan's political future to end the Afghan war. So the time has come, they say, for an inclusive dialogue leading to an inclusive peace. I have said it's our policy, we're not seeking permanent bases in Afghanistan, that our presence is condition-based, our withdrawal is condition-based, and our vision long-term is for an Afghanistan that's entirely sovereign, independent.
Khalilzad, who is leading talks with the Taliban, was at the U.S. Institute of Peace in Washington to discuss an ongoing push for a political settlement to the 17-year-old Afghanistan conflict. A former U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan who is now special envoy in the talks, Khalilzad has in recent months held meetings with Taliban officials in Qatar, where the group's senior leaders have an office in the capital Doha. He has expressed cautious optimism about the prospect of a deal and even announced a draft framework, but stressed nothing had been finalized. Critics are skeptical about the talks for a number of reasons, primarily because they have not yet included the Afghan government, which the Taliban considers US-backed puppets. Additionally, the Taliban have promised not to provide shelter again to foreign extremists, but experts say they cannot be trusted and even now are helping to hide foreign militants. The talks come as President Donald Trump pushes to end the Afghanistan conflict, where about 14,000 U.S. troops are still deployed and which has seen countless thousands of civilian and military deaths, as well as an infusion of more than $1 trillion in U.S. cash into the country. In his annual State of the Union speech on Tuesday, Trump said the time has come, and I quote, to at least try for peace. Afghanistan has suffered nearly constant conflict since the Soviet invasion of 1979, which is followed by civil war, the Taliban regime, and the U.S. invasion in late 2001. Khalilzad was a major player in George W. Bush's administration when the United States first invaded Afghanistan after the September 11, 2001 attacks.
Congressional Democrats on Thursday unveiled an unprecedented plan to reverse climate change and eliminate all U.S. carbon emissions within 10 years by taking drastic steps that would require transformational action across the economy. The Green New Deal, introduced by Liberal Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a rising Democratic star in the House, and Senator Ed Markey, is a dramatic, potentially unrealistic statement of intent on a sustainable path forward.
When we talk about a Green New Deal, we are talking about jobs and justice. We are talking about the greatest blue-collar job creation program in a generation. We are putting forward a set of principles, not prescriptions, that will require leveraging new financing, providing new resources, and training and using existing laws and new regulations to meet our 10-year goal. We can create high-quality jobs and enforce labor standards, guarantee rights to retirement security and health care, and conduct inclusive decision-making. And the greatest climate denier of them all is in the White House, Donald Trump, a president who did not utter the words climate change or clean energy during his State of the Union 2 nights ago. On the most important issue facing this country, his State of the Union, Donald Trump's State of the Union, was silent. And the greatest climate denier of them all is in the White House, Donald Trump, a president who did not utter the words climate change or clean energy during his State of the Union 2 nights ago. On the most important issue facing this country, his State of the Union, Donald Trump's State of the Union, was silent.
Climate change and our environmental challenges are one of the biggest existential threats to our way of life, not just as a nation, but as a world. And in order for us to combat that threat, we must be as ambitious and innovative in our solution as possible.
The plan does not detail exactly how America will wean itself off of fossil fuels or how much the ambitious transformation will cost. The Republican Party hammered the deal as a socialist wish list, which could cost upwards of $2 trillion. The non-binding resolution is effectively a blueprint of dramatic action. It proposes upgrading all existing buildings in the country, for example, that could be taken to address climate change. It is already playing a role on the 2020 presidential campaign trail, with progressive Democratic hopefuls, including Senators Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, expressing support. The ambitious goal, according to the measure, is to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions, in part by meeting 100% of the power demand through clean, renewable, and zero-emission energy sources. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who appeared to brush off the resolution as a green dream the day before, welcomed the enthusiasm with which Democrats were engaging in the pushing framework. The measure has dozens of sponsors, none of them Republican. The goal to become carbon neutral within a decade will most likely prove exceedingly ambitious, given the oil and gas industry's deep entrenchment in the global economy. One critical factor will be the buy-in of President Donald Trump, who pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord, as seen by Democrats as the world's most prominent climate change denier. The Paris deal saw nations agree to limit global temperature rises this century to below 2 degrees Celsius, or 3.6 Fahrenheit, and under 1.5 degrees Celsius if possible.
Failure to meet those goals, scientists have said, could result in irreversible rise in sea level, disastrous droughts, and higher temperatures. Meanwhile, in Washington state, a state of emergency has been declared, prompted by the spike in measles cases. Eagle News correspondent Int'l reports.
A few weeks ago, Washington State Governor Jay Inslee declared a state of emergency due to the measles outbreak. Now, the Washington State Health Department reports that this highly contagious disease continues to spread and urges people to receive vaccinations.
I have not directly been affected by the measles outbreak, but I know clinics in my community have. The local urgent care down the road from me had to shut down because they had a measles case come through. Well, there's really two key benefits to vaccination. The first is that you become vaccinated, and that helps prevent the disease. It helps keep you from getting the disease, and if you do end up getting measles, regardless of vaccination status, it usually minimizes the symptoms. The second is the herd vaccination. You know, if you're not vaccinated or unable to get vaccinated, but everyone around you is, that offers some protection that you may not be exposed to the measles.
Vaccination is that you protect yourself from different diseases, but also that there are people who are too young or too frail to get vaccination, and by being vaccinated you protect them as well, because then you don't become a carrier. I think a lot of the fear comes from different parents do a lot of research on their own. Don't just listen to hearsay or just making decisions based out of fear of the unknown. Find out, get educated, get the knowledge, and then you'll feel more comfortable about this decision.
As of this report, the number of confirmed cases is 50, nearly double the number from when Governor Int'l initially declared a state of emergency. 49 of the 50 cases come from Clark County. According to Clark County Public Health, out of those cases, 34 of those infected were ages 1 to 10 years old, and 13 cases were from ages 11 to 18. Health officials have warned that people infected with the disease had visited schools, churches, a dentist's office, a Costco store, an IKEA store, and the Portland airport. Governor Int'l tweeted, "Measles is a highly contagious disease that can be fatal in small children. Almost everyone who is not immune will get measles if they are exposed to the virus." Officials urge people to take precautions to help stop the spread of the disease. Measles can cause pneumonia, diarrhea, and even vision loss. It could even be fatal. Reporting to you from Washington State, I'm Frenzel Heron. I am 1 with 25.
Thank you, Frenzel. When we come back, Edmonton endures below zero temperatures. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. will return shortly. This is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. I'm Ace Ramirez. Winter in Edmonton has not been pleasant. For several days now, Alberta, Canada's capital, has been enduring below zero temperatures. That is not pleasant indeed. Our Eagle News correspondent Thomas Likeness with the details.
With the extreme cold temperatures in Canada's prairie provinces, probably the best place for the car is parked, preferably in a garage. The three prairie provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, have been in a deep freeze for more than a week. Temperatures with wind chill have dropped to the -40s overnight, with daytime highs in the -30s. Combined with snow at times, it has made driving hazardous because of reduced visibility. Even without the snow, streets are a sheet of ice, and the slippery conditions have resulted in hundreds of accidents in the major cities of the provinces. The cold is dangerous for those who are outdoors. Prolonged exposure can lead to frostbite and even death. In Alberta, weather has been blamed for the deaths of 2 people. The body of a 92-year-old man was found a short distance from his car which ended up in a ditch. He froze to death going for help. Edmonton police say a man was found frozen to death near the city's football stadium. For the homeless, finding a warm place to stay can be a challenge. Some set up makeshift tents. Others find a bed for the night at shelters, but those shelters are running at capacity. People who have to be outside cope by dressing with many layers of clothing. And this little guy, well, he has his own fur coat. The prairie provinces are unlikely to see any relief from these cold temperatures for at least a week. In the deep freeze in Edmonton, Canada, Thomas I. Liknes, Eagle News, I'm one with 25.
That is today's Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Join us again tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at Eaglenews.PH and EagleNewsLive.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/EagleNewsPH. Thank you for watching. I'm Ace Ramirez. I'm one with 25.